Mara had always lived a quiet life in the old district of New Vega. The streets here were narrow and crowded, lined with small shops that sold fresh bread, repair parts, and recycled clothing. She liked the calm routine of her days. She worked as a caretaker for children whose parents spent long hours in the city's towers. She cooked for them, told them stories, and taught them how to read. Mara never expected her life to change in any big way. She had no family of her own and no great wealth. She was happy enough with the small things she had. One evening, she was closing the small care center where she worked when a tall man in a dark suit stepped inside. He moved with quiet confidence. His suit looked like it had been made from some kind of smooth fabric that caught the light in a strange way. The man introduced himself as Dorian Vex. Mara recognized the name. Everyone in the city knew it. Dorian Vex was one of the richest men on Earth. His company built massive ships that sailed between planets. It was said he was preparing to launch the first vessel that could reach the edge of human-explored space. Dorian explained that he needed someone to care for his newborn child. The request alone might not have surprised Mara, but what followed did. He wanted her to live inside his private estate for as long as the job required. She would be the child's sole guardian in his absence. There would be no visitors and no contact with the outside world without his approval. The payment he offered was more than she could imagine earning in her entire lifetime. But he made it clear that the work was not about money. It was about trust. Mara asked why he had come to her. He said he had done his research. He knew she had no criminal record, no debts, and no history of betrayal. He had seen her take care of children with patience and kindness. He said his child would need more than a caretaker. He would need someone who could protect him from dangers she could not yet understand. Mara tried to ask more, but he only told her that secrecy was the most important part of the arrangement. He warned her that if she accepted, she would be stepping into a life unlike anything she had known. The next morning, a sleek silver transport came for her. It glided through the streets without making a sound and took her out of the old district toward the upper levels of New Vega, where the air was cleaner and the sunlight reached without the haze of the lower city. Soon she saw the Vex estate. It was unlike any home she had seen. The building was made of glass and steel, rising high like a watchtower. Around it stretched wide green gardens filled with plants from other worlds. Security drones hovered above the walls, moving silently from point to point. Inside the gates, the transport stopped at the main entrance. The doors slid open, and a tall machine shaped like a human, but made of smooth white alloy, greeted her. It spoke in a calm voice and told her its name was Aris. Aris explained that it would assist her in daily care of the child and in the running of the household. Mara followed the machine through the hall. Every wall seemed alive with shifting displays of stars and distant planets. The air carried a faint scent of flowers she could not name. When they reached the nursery, Mara saw the baby for the first time. He was small and quiet, lying in a soft cradle shaped like a half-moon. His skin was pale and smooth, his hair dark and fine, but it was his eyes that caught her attention. Even in the soft light, they seemed to carry tiny flecks that shimmered like the night sky. When she leaned closer, the baby did not cry. Instead, he watched her as if he understood more than a newborn should. Aris told her the child's name was Orion. Mara sat by the cradle and introduced herself softly. She felt an odd warmth in her chest when she looked at him. She promised in her mind that she would care for him as if he were her own. That night, she was shown to her room, a place larger than her entire apartment in the old district. The bed was soft, the walls lined with shelves of books, and the window looked out over the gardens, where strange blue lights moved among the plants. Over the next few days, she settled into her new life. The estate was quiet, except for the gentle hum of machines. Aris prepared meals and maintained the building, but never intruded on her time with Orion. Dorian sent short messages from somewhere far away, saying he would be gone for many months, and that she should keep Orion safe. Mara followed the schedule Aris provided, feeding Orion, bathing him, and holding him when he grew restless. Sometimes she would take him to the garden, where the air was fresh and the stars could be seen even in daylight through a faint shimmer. In the sky one evening as the sun set, Mara stood on the balcony holding Orion. The city below glowed with lights, and the sky above deepened into purple. She thought of the life she had left behind. She wondered why such a powerful man would entrust his child to her and why he insisted on such secrecy. She looked at Orion's strange eyes again and felt that there was something more to him than anyone had told her. Far away beyond the reach of the city's tallest towers, a large ship moved silently in orbit. On its bridge, Dorian Vex stood watching the stars, his hands clasped behind his back. He knew the choice he had made was risky, but if anyone could raise Orion in safety, it was Mara. He had seen in her something that no machine or guard could provide. A human heart capable of loyalty and compassion without limit. Mara did not yet know it, but the quiet days in the glass and steel estate would not last. The world beyond those walls was watching, and the child in her care carried a destiny that could change the fate of two civilizations. Days passed in a calm rhythm inside the Vex estate. Mara woke with the first light that touched the glass walls. She would check on Orion, who usually lay awake in his cradle, watching the morning sky through the wide window. He did not cry much. Instead, he would make soft sounds and study her face, as if he was trying to read her thoughts. Mara found this strange, yet comforting. She had cared for many children before, but none had such a quiet, yet strong presence. The estate itself felt more like a living thing than a building. The walls shifted their displays according to the time of day, showing views of faraway planets or the deep ocean. The floor was warm beneath her feet, no matter the season. At night, the ceiling in the nursery turned into a perfect map of the stars. Mara often caught herself staring at it long after Orion had fallen asleep. She felt like she was living inside a small piece of the universe. Aris, the household machine, was polite and precise in everything it did. It would bring her meals on time, prepare Orion's formula, and keep the rooms clean without a sound. Yet Mara noticed that Aris often paused when passing by the nursery, as if it was checking on them more than necessary. When she asked about it, Aris would only reply that the child's safety was its top priority. One afternoon, Mara explored a wing of the estate she had not visited before. The corridor there was dim and silent. At the end, she found a locked door made of some metal she had never seen. It had no handle, only a small, glowing panel. When she touched it, the panel flashed red, and a gentle voice from the wall asked her to return to her assigned areas. She stepped back uneasy but curious about what could be behind that door. That night, she had trouble sleeping. A soft hum came from somewhere deep in the building. It was not the normal sound of machines she had grown used to. It was steady and low, almost like a heartbeat. When she mentioned it to Aris the next morning, the machine said it was the central energy core and there was no cause for concern. Still, she noticed Aris watching her more closely after that. Orion continued to grow quickly. His eyes still held that strange shimmer, like tiny sparks caught in liquid. Sometimes, when Mara was tired and holding him, she felt her breathing slow, and her mind clear as if some invisible hand had lifted her worries. She tried to tell herself it was just the comfort of holding a child, but deep down, she wondered if there was more to it. One rainy evening, the estate's glass walls were streaked with silver lines as water slid down their surface. The lights inside dimmed slightly, and Aris announced that a mild power fluctuation had occurred in the outer grid. For a moment, the constant background hum of the estate's systems faded. In that brief silence, Orion's eyes brightened in a way Mara had never seen before. A soft blue light spread from his gaze over his small face and down to his hands. She gasped, but before she could react, the lights returned, and the glow was gone. Mara sat in the nursery chair, holding him close. She whispered to him, asking what he was. Orion only looked at her with calm curiosity. She decided not to tell Eris about what she had seen. Something in her told her to keep it to herself. She remembered Dorian's warning about secrecy and felt sure that this was part of what he had meant. The days after the incident felt different. Mara became more aware of the quiet in the mansion. The estate was huge, yet no other humans ever came. Supplies arrived by drone through the service gate. Messages from Dorian were short and gave no detail about his work. She began to feel that they were in a bubble separated from the rest of the world. At night, she would stand by the balcony holding Orion and look toward the distant lights of the city, wondering if anyone there knew what kind of child lived in the Vex estate. One morning, Mara decided to take Orion into the gardens for a longer walk than usual. The garden paths wound between plants with colors she had never seen before. Some leaves shimmered silver under the sun, while others gave off a faint, sweet scent. Eris followed at a distance, its steps completely silent. They reached a small pond where water rippled without wind. Orion seemed fascinated by the reflections in the water. He reached out and touched the surface. For a moment, the ripples moved in perfect circles, then stopped entirely as if frozen. When he pulled his hand back, the water returned to normal. Mara felt a chill even though the air was warm. She told herself again that babies did not do things like this. She wondered if Dorian had chosen her because he knew she would not run away, even when faced with strange events. She had always believed that every child deserved love no matter how different they might be. Still, she could not deny her growing unease. What if someone else discovered these things? That night, Mara checked all the nursery locks twice. She sat by Orion's cradle until he drifted into sleep. The hum of the estate seemed louder than before, as if the building itself was aware of her thoughts. She finally went to bed, but woke suddenly in the middle of the night. A faint movement in the shadows near the window caught her eye. She rushed to the cradle but found Orion safe. The movement was gone. She stood there for a long time, listening to the quiet, before slowly returning to her room. Far above the estate, in the dark sky, a small craft hovered beyond normal sensor range. Its hull reflected no light. Inside, two figures studied a screen that showed the image of the Vex estate. One of them tapped the display and said the child was still inside. The other replied that they would wait for the right moment. Their voices were calm, but their eyes were fixed with intent. Whatever they wanted, it was clear they knew more about Orion than Mara could imagine. Mara slept again without knowing she was being watched from the sky. The silent mansion lived up to its name, but silence often hides more than it reveals. Soon, the stillness would be broken, and the quiet life she had begun to accept would be replaced by something far more dangerous. The third week in the Vex estate began with clear skies and soft light streaming through the nursery window. Mara followed her usual routine but could not shake the unease that had been growing since the night she saw movement in the shadows. She had told herself it was just her imagination, yet her instincts refused to rest. Orion seemed as calm as ever, his small hands reaching for the toys that Eris had placed in his cradle. The shimmer in his eyes appeared brighter when the sunlight touched them. During the day, Mara tried to distract herself by exploring more of the gardens. She discovered paths lined with flowers that opened and closed with the movement of the sun. There were trees with silver bark that hummed softly when the wind passed through their leaves. Orion reacted strongly to these places. He would become alert, his gaze fixed on the plants as though he understood them. Mara noticed that the air around them always felt warmer when he smiled. That night the estate felt unusually still. Even the steady hum of the machines seemed softer. Mara put Orion to sleep and settled into the chair by the window with a book from the library. The pages were old and smelled faintly of dust and metal. She read until the words began to blur, then closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, the room was darker than it should have been. The wall displays had gone black and the faint blue lights in the hall were out. Before she could rise, Eris's voice spoke from the hidden speakers, informing her that a power disruption had occurred in the outer systems and emergency energy reserves were active. Mara set the book aside and hurried to Orion's cradle. He was awake and watching her with that same calm expression, but as she drew closer, a faint glow began to form in his eyes. The light spread slowly across his face, illuminating the curve of his cheeks and the tips of his small fingers. Mara froze. The glow was not harsh, but soft and steady, like moonlight captured in water. She felt her own heartbeat slow, her breath becoming even and steady. The anxiety she had carried all day seemed to dissolve in the air. It was as if the light itself was reaching into her mind and smoothing every sharp edge of worry. She stood there, caught between awe and fear, until the estate's systems came back to life. The lights returned, and Orion's glow faded as though it had never been there. He closed his eyes again and drifted into sleep. Mara sat beside the cradle for the rest of the night, too alert to rest. She thought about what she had just witnessed. It was no trick of the mind. She had felt the change in her own body. She wanted to ask Aris if it had seen anything, but something inside her told her not to. The machine reported everything to Dorian, and she was not ready for him to know she had discovered something unusual. For now, she decided this would be her secret. The following day, she moved carefully through her tasks. Aris went about its work as usual, but Mara sensed it watching her more than normal. Once, while feeding Orion, she noticed the reflection of the machine's eyes in the glass wall. They were fixed directly on the baby's face. She turned quickly, and Aris stepped back, stating that it was only ensuring Orion's safety. Still, she wondered if the machine already knew what had happened during the blackout later that evening. While Orion was napping, Mara found herself in the study. She had not spent much time here before. As the shelves were filled with Dorian's personal files and star charts she did not understand. On one of the desks, a small console was still active, its screen showing an encrypted message half hidden under layers of data. She had no idea how to read the codes, but a single image on the screen caught her attention. It was a scan of Orion's face, taken when he was only a few hours old. Next to the image were faint glowing patterns that matched the shimmer in his eyes. Underneath was a word she had never seen before: Luminara. She quickly closed the screen when she heard the sound of Aris approaching. The machine entered, carrying a tray of tea. It placed the tray on the desk and told her that Dorian would be sending a message later in the night. Mara nodded and thanked it, hiding her racing thoughts. She had no idea what Luminara meant, but the word seemed heavy with importance. That night she stayed awake to receive Dorian's message. His face appeared on the wall display, tired, but focused. He asked if Orion was healthy and if the estate was secure. Mara told him everything was fine, though she felt the weight of the truth she was holding back. Dorian seemed relieved and told her he would be away longer than expected. Before the call ended, his expression changed slightly. He reminded her that Orion's safety was more important than anything else. She agreed, and the display went dark. The rest of the night was quiet, but Mara could not sleep. Her mind kept circling back to the glow, the strange patterns, and the word she had seen. She began to think of the locked door in the other wing. Perhaps the answers she wanted were behind it. But how could she open it without Aris noticing? Far beyond the estate, the small craft that had been watching from the sky drifted closer. Inside, the two figures from before monitored their equipment. A faint signal had been detected during the blackout, and they believed it had come from the child. One of them adjusted the controls, locking the scanner onto the Vex estate. They spoke quietly about timing, patience, and the value of what they were after, back inside the mansion. Mara stood by the window in the nursery, looking out at the gardens under the moonlight. Orion slept peacefully, his small chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. She reached down and touched his hand gently, feeling the warmth of his skin. She promised him softly that she would keep him safe, no matter what Dorian had left unsaid. She did not know yet what forces were moving beyond the glass walls, but she could feel that change was coming. Somewhere deep in the building, behind the locked door, a faint pulse of light flickered once, and then was still again. The estate remained, silent, but the night was holding secrets and Mara was beginning to uncover them. The next morning began like any other. Sunlight filled the nursery, soft and golden, and Orion lay awake in his cradle making quiet sounds. Mara moved through her tasks, feeding him and checking the room temperature, but her mind was not at rest. The image she had seen on the console the night before kept returning to her thoughts. The glowing patterns in Orion's scan, the shimmer in his eyes, and that single word, Luminara. She decided she needed to know what it meant. When Eris left to inspect the garden's irrigation systems, Mara returned to the study. She sat at the same desk where she had seen the file. The console was still there, the faint light of the display waiting. She tapped the screen and tried to find the same file again. Most of the folders were locked with codes she did not understand, but after searching, she found the image once more. She studied it closely. The patterns in Orion's scan were not random. They seemed like a map or a sequence. Below the image, small text described something about genetic markers and hybrid structures. The words were filled with technical language. But one thing was clear: Orion was not entirely human. Mara leaned back in the chair, the truth sinking in. She remembered his strange calmness, the glow in his eyes, the way water had frozen still under his touch. Now it made sense. Eris returned unexpectedly, its smooth voice breaking the silence. It asked if she needed anything. Mara quickly closed the file and said she was only looking for a book. The machine tilted its head slightly, as if it knew she was hiding something, but it did not press the matter. Later, while Orion napped, Mara went to the locked door in the other wing. She stood before the glowing panel, wondering if there was a way to open it. She placed her hand on the surface again, but the red light returned and the same voice instructed her to leave the area. She glanced down the hall to be sure Eris was not watching, then turned back to the panel. Without knowing why, she whispered the word Luminara. The panel's light shifted from red to green. A faint click sounded, and the door slid open. Mara froze in shock. She had not expected it to work. Inside was a room unlike any other in the estate. The walls were curved and smooth, glowing with a soft silver light. In the center stood a cylindrical chamber filled with a pale blue mist. Around it were consoles and displays showing star charts and streams of data she did not understand. On the largest display, an image appeared, an alien face, elegant and luminous, with eyes that shimmered like Orion's. The figure spoke in a calm voice. "You are the guardian. I am Solara of the Luminara." Mara's hands tightened on the edge of the console. She did not know if she was speaking to a live transmission or a recording, but the voice continued. Solara explained that the Luminara were a peaceful civilization from a star system far beyond human reach. They had long observed humanity, but never revealed themselves until a rare alliance was formed. Orion's mother was Luminara, his father human. The child was the first of his kind, carrying traits from both species. Solara's image faded for a moment, replaced by a map of stars. The voice continued, explaining that Orion could one day serve as a bridge between their peoples. But there were others who feared this union. Some believed that combining human and Luminara traits could create a being too powerful, one that could upset the balance between worlds. Those forces would seek to take Orion and control him, or worse, end his life before he could grow into his potential. Mara's chest felt tight as she listened. Now she understood why Dorian had been so secretive, why no one was allowed near the estate, and why she had been chosen. She was not just a caretaker, she was a shield. The image of Solara returned. You must protect him until the time comes. His abilities will grow, and with them, the dangers will grow as well. Trust your instincts, Guardian. The display went dark, and the door closed automatically behind her. Mara stood in the hallway, heart pounding. She wanted to tell Dorian. She had discovered the truth. But something told her he already knew she would find out eventually. Instead, she went back to the nursery and looked at Orion. His small hands reached for her, and she picked him up, holding him close. Days passed after that, but Mara's world no longer felt the same. Every glance at Orion carried new meaning. She began to notice more subtle things, how the plants in the garden seemed to lean toward him, how he could calm the barking of a stray dog outside the gate, how the air felt charged when he laughed. At night, she often thought of Solara's warning. Somewhere out there, enemies were waiting for the right time to strike. She did not know who they were, but she could feel them drawing closer. One evening, while feeding Orion, Mara heard a faint tapping sound on the outer glass wall. She turned and saw nothing but the reflection of the room. Still, the sound had been real. She placed Orion in his cradle and stepped closer to the glass. Far above, against the backdrop of stars, she thought she saw a small, dark shape moving slowly, almost as if it were watching the estate. Aris entered the nursery then, asking if everything was all right. Mara nodded, though her eyes stayed on the sky. She knew that whatever was out there, it was not random. The timing was too perfect. That night, she could not sleep. She sat by the cradle, her mind heavy with the truth. She whispered to Orion that no matter what came, she would keep him safe. He looked up at her with those shimmering eyes, and for a moment, she thought she saw understanding in them, as if he already knew his place in the universe. Far above the mansion, the small craft still hovered, its scanners now active. Inside, the two shadowed figures reviewed the data they had gathered. One of them nodded slowly. The hybrid's abilities are developing. Soon we move. In the quiet of the nursery, Mara sat holding the child, unaware of the exact danger, but feeling it all the same. The truth had been revealed, but with it came the weight of responsibility and the knowledge that the silent mansion was no longer hidden from the eyes of the world beyond. The morning began quietly, but Mara felt a strange tension in the air. The sky above the estate was clear, yet she noticed more security drones than usual gliding across the gardens. Aris explained that they were performing a routine systems check, but Mara suspected there was more to it. Since learning the truth about Orion, she had been watching for signs of danger. Now those signs were here. She carried Orion through the garden paths, trying to make the morning feel normal. The plants swayed gently in the breeze, and the pond reflected the sky like polished glass. Orion's tiny hand reached out toward the silver-leaf trees, and as always, they seemed to bend slightly toward him. Mara smiled at the sight, but could not ignore the faint hum in the distance. It was low and constant, coming from beyond the estate walls. Back inside, Mara placed Orion in his cradle and checked the outer security feed. The display showed the perimeter, the gates, and the airspace above. At first, everything looked normal. Then she saw it. A dark shape moving along the edge of the property just out of range of the automated defenses. It was not one of Dorian's drones. This one was smaller, sharper, and moved like a scout. She turned to Aris and asked about the movement. The machine paused for a moment before answering. It claimed that no threat was detected. Mara did not believe it. She had learned that Aris followed Dorian's orders above all else, and sometimes those orders included keeping information from her. That night, after Orion was asleep, Mara stayed near the security screens. Hours passed without incident until the same shape appeared again, this time closer. It hovered for a moment, then darted away as if it knew it had been seen. Mara's chest tightened. Whoever was out there was testing the estate's defenses. The next day, the tension grew. The air around the estate felt heavier, and even Orion seemed more alert. He watched the windows as though sensing something beyond them. Mara took him to the garden again, hoping the fresh air would calm them both. As they walked, a faint flicker of movement caught her eye. A small, insect-like drone was perched on the wall, almost blending into the metal. It rotated its head and emitted a faint click. Without thinking, Mara stepped between the drone and Orion, shielding him with her body. She turned and hurried back inside, her heart pounding. Once in the safety of the nursery, she activated the manual security lock. Later that evening, Aris came to her with a message from Dorian. His image appeared on the wall display, his voice steady but urgent. He told her that there had been increased interest in his estate from unknown parties. He reassured her that the defenses were strong, but she must remain alert. Mara asked directly if these unknown parties were after Orion. Dorian's pause before answering was all she needed. He confirmed it quietly, saying that some groups believed the child could be used as a weapon or a tool for power. When the call ended, Mara sat for a long time in silence. The peaceful life she had known here was gone. She was not only a caretaker. Now, she was a guardian in the truest sense. That night, the first breach came. It started with the sound of metal striking metal somewhere in the outer garden. The estate's alarms stayed silent, but Mara knew something was wrong. She picked up Orion and wrapped him in a blanket. Eris appeared in the doorway, its tone calm but firm, telling her to move to the safe room. They reached the reinforced chamber deep inside the estate. The walls sealed shut behind them, and a low hum filled the space. Eris took position near the door, its eyes glowing faintly. Mara sat on the floor holding Orion close, listening for any sound beyond the walls. Through the faint audio feed, she heard the outer gates opening. There was no grinding of gears or loud alarms, only the quiet release of locks. Whoever was entering knew how to bypass the systems. The footsteps that followed were soft but deliberate. Eris stayed still, its sensors tracking the intruders. Mara could hear faint static in the comms as if someone was trying to disrupt the estate's network. She whispered to Orion, promising him that nothing would happen to him while she was there. He looked up at her with those shimmering eyes, and she felt a calm determination rise in her chest. The footsteps grew louder, moving closer to the safe room. Then there was a sharp flash of light, and the audio feed cut out completely. Aris turned its head toward Mara and told her to remain still. The door to the safe room vibrated slightly, as though someone was testing its strength. Minutes passed, like hours. Then the vibrations stopped, and silence returned. Aris signaled that the intruders had retreated, but it could not confirm why. When the doors finally opened, Mara stepped out cautiously. The rest of the estate was untouched, but the outer gates were open, and the strange scout drone was gone. In the days that followed, the attacks did not come again, but Mara knew it was only a matter of time. Whoever they were, they had been. Close enough to taste success, and they would not give up easily. She began carrying a small handheld scanner wherever she went, checking for hidden devices in the rooms and halls. She also noticed changes in Orion. He seemed more aware, responding to sounds and movements beyond the walls. One afternoon, as she sat with him in the garden, he reached out toward the sky. A faint shimmer spread from his fingertips, almost invisible, like heat rising from the ground. Mara felt a sudden pressure in the air, and for a moment, all the garden sounds stopped. No birds, no wind, no hum of machines, only stillness. Then it passed, and the normal sounds returned. She looked at Orion and understood what had happened. He had sensed the danger before she did. He was growing, and so were his abilities. That meant the people searching for him would only grow more determined. Far above, the small craft returned to its hidden orbit. Inside, the shadowed figures reviewed their data once more. One of them leaned forward and said, "The child is advancing faster than expected. Next time, we will not leave without him." Back in the nursery, Mara rocked Orion to sleep, her mind sharp and focused. The intruders had failed this time, but she knew the real fight had not yet begun. The unwanted interest was no longer a distant threat. It was here, and it was only waiting for the right moment to strike again. 3 days after the intrusion, the estate felt different. The gardens were still beautiful, the walls still strong, but the air carried a weight that Mara could not shake. Even Orion seemed quieter, watching the doors and windows with a curious, almost knowing expression. Mara stayed close to him at all times, the small scanner always in her pocket. That morning, the silence was broken by the deep hum of a descending craft. Mara looked out from the upper balcony and saw a sleek black ship lowering onto the landing pad. The vessel bore Dorian's crest, and the moment it touched down, Eris announced that the master had returned. Dorian stepped out of the ship, his presence commanding as always. He crossed the courtyard quickly, his dark coat catching the sunlight. When he reached Mara, his sharp eyes softened for a moment as they moved to Orion. Without a word, he motioned for them to follow him into the private study. Once the heavy doors closed, Dorian leaned against the desk, his voice low but urgent. He explained that the group that had tried to breach the estate was not just a band of criminals. They were part of a powerful network operating across multiple star systems. Their interest in Orion was not recent. They had been watching since, the day he was born. Mara listened without speaking, her arms tightening around the child. She asked what they wanted with him, but Dorian's answer was vague. He said Orion's heritage made him both a threat and an opportunity. In the wrong hands, he could be turned into a tool for control. In the right hands, he could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Then Dorian told her why he had returned so quickly. He had been contacted by an ally, someone who could hide Orion far away, in a place where the network would never find him. But there was a cost. Once Orion was taken there, he could never return. Mara's role as his caretaker would end, and she might never see him again. The words sank into her like cold water. She had raised Orion since the day he came into the world. She had seen his first smile, heard his first laugh, and now watched his strange, beautiful abilities grow. The thought of sending him away felt like tearing out a piece of her own heart. She asked Dorian if the estate was not safe enough. He shook his head. The intrusion had shown him that even the strongest defenses could be bypassed. The network was patient, and sooner or later, they would succeed. That night, Mara could not sleep. She walked through the quiet halls with Orion, in her arms, her mind turning over the choice she faced. In the nursery, the moonlight cast a silver glow across his face. He opened his eyes and looked at her with a calm that seemed far beyond his years. As she stood there, Eris entered silently. The machine told her that it had reviewed every security record since Orion's birth. In its calculation, the probability of another, more dangerous attempt within the next month was nearly certain. It then said something unexpected, that it had been given no instructions on what to do if she refused Dorian's plan. This meant the decision was truly hers. The next day, Mara joined Dorian in the study. She asked to know more about the place he wanted to send Orion. He explained that it was hidden on a remote world protected by ancient technology. Few could reach it, and fewer still could survive there without permission from its guardians. Orion would grow safely under their care, and one day, when he was old enough, he would be free to choose his own path. Mara's heart ached, but she also felt the heavy truth of the situation. She could keep him here and fight every day to protect him, or she could let him go now and give him a life without constant danger. Dorian gave her 2 days to decide. During those days, Mara watched Orion closely. She took him into the gardens, telling him stories about the stars and the people who lived among them. She sang to him at night, her voice steady even as her thoughts wavered. She wanted him to know love, even if he might not remember her voice years from now. On the evening of the second day, as the twin suns began to set, Mara carried Orion to the edge of the garden where the silver leaf trees stood. The wind moved gently through their branches, and she thought about the strange way they always bent toward him. She realized that his presence was not just rare, it was something alive, something the galaxy might never see again. When she returned to the study, Dorian was waiting. She stood before him, her hands holding Orion close, and told him her choice. She would let Orion go. Her voice did not shake as she said it, but inside she felt the sharp sting of loss. Dorian nodded, his expression unreadable. He said the transport would arrive at dawn. The guardians of the hidden world would meet them halfway and take the child to safety. Mara would be allowed to travel with him to the transfer point, but no further. That night was the longest of her life. She did not sleep, instead holding Orion and whispering to him about the stars, the winds, and the gardens he had loved. She told him that he would grow strong, that he would learn, and that one day he would understand why she had let him go. When the first light of dawn touched the estate, the sound of the transport filled the air. Mara walked slowly to the landing pad, Dorian beside her. Aris followed silently, carrying a small case with Orion's few belongings. As they boarded, Mara looked back at the estate. The walls, the gardens, the silver trees, all would remain. But the heart of her life was about to leave. She sat by the viewport as the ship lifted into the sky, holding Orion one last time in the place they had shared. The stars stretched out before them, bright and endless. Somewhere out there was a world where he would be safe, and she had chosen to send him to it. It was the right choice, but the ache in her chest told her it would never be an easy one. The ship glided smoothly through the thin bands of atmosphere before entering the quiet stillness of space. Stars hung like cold diamonds against the endless black. Mara sat by the viewport with Orion in her arms, his small hands reaching for the glowing trails of distant suns. Dorian stood near the front, speaking to the pilot in low tones, his eyes often glancing toward them. Mara's thoughts were heavy. Every beat of her heart counted down the moments until she would have to let him go. She wondered if he would remember her face, the sound of her voice, or the stories she had whispered to him under the silver leaf trees. She hoped he would remember love, even if he could not remember her name. Hours passed quietly until the pilot announced that they were approaching the transfer point. Mara looked out and saw it, a station unlike any she had ever seen. It was not made of metal alone, but seemed grown from some vast living structure, glowing faintly as if it drew its strength from the stars themselves. Dorian explained that this was the meeting place of the Guardians. They would take Orion from here to the hidden world. The ship slowed as it entered a protective field, and a docking platform extended toward them. As the hatch opened, the air changed. It was warmer, carrying a faint scent of earth and rain. A tall figure awaited them, clad in robes of deep blue, the Guardian's face partly hidden beneath a hood. When the figure spoke, the voice was calm, yet carried the weight of centuries. They greeted Dorian by name, then looked directly at Mara. "You are the one who kept him safe all these years. the Guardian said. "You have done more than was asked. Of you." Mara nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. They began to walk toward the inner chambers of the station. The floor beneath their feet pulsed faintly, as though alive. Along the walls, shapes moved slowly within translucent panels, shadows of great creatures Mara could not name. She felt as if she had stepped into the heart of something ancient and vast. Before they could reach the central hall, an alarm sounded. The deep hum of the station shifted into a sharp, urgent rhythm. The Guardian stopped, head tilting as if listening to something unseen. Dorian moved quickly, speaking into a communicator. Mara's instincts tightened. Danger was near. The Guardian turned toward her. "There is a ship approaching at high speed," they said. "It does not belong here." Mara knew without being told. It was the network. They had found them. Dorian spoke quickly to the Guardian, arranging for an immediate transfer, but the Guardian hesitated. The gate to the hidden world required a precise sequence to open, and it could not be rushed. If they forced it, the passage would collapse, trapping them in the void between. Mara understood then that they had only minutes before the intruders arrived. She looked at Orion, who gazed back at her with wide, steady eyes. Something in that look told her he understood more than she could explain. The Guardian led them into the central hall, a vast circular space filled with tall, crystal-like pillars. In the center, a ring of light hovered above the floor, spinning. Slowly. This was the gate. The Guardian began to work, hands moving over a console that glowed with shifting symbols. Suddenly, the station shuddered. The intruder ship had locked onto the docking platform. Dorian drew a small weapon from his coat, his voice sharp as he told Mara to stay behind him. But Mara knew that if the network reached them before Orion was through the gate, everything would be lost. She turned to the Guardian. "How long until it opens?" she asked. The Guardian replied, "1 minute. If the pattern holds." It was enough, but only if they could hold the intruders off. Mara stepped forward, placing herself between the hall's entrance and the gate. She took the scanner from her pocket. It was not a weapon, but she had learned to use it to create temporary energy barriers. Dorian gave her a sharp look, but said nothing. He understood. The sound of footsteps echoed from the corridor. Figures emerged, dressed in dark suits with masks that hid their faces. They moved with precision, their eyes locked on Orion. Mara activated the scanner, and a wall of shimmering light burst into place. The first wave of attackers slammed against it. Their movement slowed, but not stopped. Behind her, the ring of light at the center of the hall began to spin faster. The air grew heavy, charged with strange energy. The Guardian called out. It was ready. Mara turned to Dorian. "Go," she said. "Take him now." Dorian hesitated for only a moment before lifting Orion into his arms. The child did not cry. Instead, he reached toward Mara, small fingers stretching for her hand. She stepped close enough to let him touch her one last time. "Be safe, little star," she whispered. The Guardian guided Dorian and Orion into the ring of light. A flash of brilliance filled the hall, and they were gone. The attackers pushed harder against the barrier. The scanner's charge was failing. Mara backed away slowly, the energy flickering in front of her. She knew she could not follow. Her place was here, holding the line until the gate closed. The Guardian stepped to her side. "It is done," they said. "The path has sealed. They will not find him now." Mara let the barrier fall. The attackers surged forward. But the Guardian raised one hand, and a wave of force swept through the hall, casting them back like leaves in the wind. In the silence that followed, Mara felt the ache in her chest deepen. She had done what she promised. Orion was safe, but the space in her arms felt unbearably empty. When they returned to the docking bay, Dorian's ship awaited her. He would Return soon, but alone. As Mara stepped aboard, she looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of danger, Orion was beginning a new life. She hoped the galaxy would be kind to him, and though her part in his story had ended, she knew her watch over him would never truly stop.